I knew something was wrong the moment his eyes locked on mine that morning. Cold, purposeful, almost desperate, before he even opened his mouth. Ethan never looked at me like that. Not when we met, not when he first tried to pretend I was just another waitress he'd forget, and definitely not during those strange weeks when he kept showing up at the small diner where I worked, sitting in the same booth ordering coffee he barely drank. But that morning, when he stood outside my apartment door in Queens with rain dripping from his hair, he looked like a man about to gamble his entire life on a single sentence. And he did. He exhaled shakily and said he needed something from me, something impossible, something only someone with nothing left to lose would dare to ask. He wanted a child, with me. Not love, not a relationship, not even the promise of a future between us. Just a child. I felt my breath catch as he whispered that he didn't trust anyone else, that I was the only person who had ever looked at him without seeing his last name, his family's money, or the political dynasty he was expected to continue. I wanted to laugh, or scream, or slam the door in his face, but instead I stood frozen, clutching the warm mug of instant coffee in my hands as if it could anchor me to reality. My grandmother always said desperation makes even the proud kneel. And Ethan, this tall, guarded American with the world carved between his ribs, was kneeling before me without bowing his head. I asked him why me, why now, and what he really wanted, because no man like him asked a Latina immigrant waitress to carry his child unless he was hiding something. He said quietly that he needed someone strong, someone who didn't bend, someone who wouldn't use the baby as a weapon the way people in his world did. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, not from flattery, but from the sting of being chosen for my supposed disposability. He swore that wasn't it, swore he respected me more than anyone he knew, swore he would take care of everything, the medical bills, the apartment, the months I would have to stop working. His voice trembled when he said he wanted a chance to break the cycle of cold, loveless heirs his family kept producing. His tone made me wonder if he had been raised more as a legacy than a son. I stood there listening, torn between fear and a strange, unwelcome tenderness for him. I thought about my mother's hands bruised from cleaning offices, about the dreams I had abandoned to survive, about the rent I was already late on. And I thought about the way Ethan sometimes looked at me like he was trying to memorize the shape of a different life. Maybe I was foolish, maybe I was reckless, maybe I was too tired to keep choosing the safer path. But I said yes. I said yes because life had never offered me anything without demanding a piece of my soul, and maybe this was just another bargain I had to make. But the moment the word left my mouth, Ethan's shoulders sagged with a relief so intense it frightened me. It wasn't the relief of a man who had convinced someone to help him. It was the relief of a man who had just avoided disaster. I felt it like a whisper crawling along my skin, telling me I had stepped into something darker than a simple arrangement. Months later, when the baby was born and the nurses carried her to me, the room went silent, too silent. Ethan stared at the newborn with a look that wasn't joy, wasn't shock, wasn't fear, but something far more terrifying. Recognition. His lips parted, his face drained of color, and he stumbled back as if he had seen a ghost wearing the face of his child. And then he whispered, trembling, "It can't be her. She's been dead for years." The words slipped from Ethan's mouth like a curse he had spent years trying not to speak, and for a second I thought I had misheard him. The hospital room smelled of disinfectant and warm linen, the fluorescent lights humming softly above us, but everything inside me froze. He wasn't looking at me, he wasn't even looking at our daughter as a newborn, but as something impossible, something that broke the rules of his carefully constructed world. His eyes were wide, glassy, almost frightened, and for the first time since the day he showed up at my door asking for the unthinkable, he looked completely unguarded. I felt my throat tighten as I asked what he meant, who he was talking about, and why he suddenly looked like the ground had disappeared beneath him. He didn't answer. He just shook his head, whispering to himself like he was trying to undo whatever he believed he was seeing. A nurse walked in, smiling, asking if we wanted to take pictures, but Ethan stepped back so abruptly she flinched. His voice cracked when he said he needed a moment, and before I could stop him, he turned and pushed out of the room. I tried to call after him, but my voice felt trapped somewhere between my ribs and my fear. The nurse gave me a worried look, but I forced a smile, pretending everything was normal. Yet the moment she left, I looked down at my daughter, cradled in the blanket, and saw that Ethan wasn't reacting to nothing. Her features, delicate and unmistakable, carried a strange familiarity I couldn't quite place. His words echoed inside my mind. She's been dead for years. And for the first time since agreeing to have this child, I wondered if I had stepped into a story far older and darker than mine. I traced her tiny nose with my fingertip, noticing the shape, the particular curve of her eyelids, the faint dimple near her lip. Nothing unusual, nothing unnatural, but something undeniably inherited. It should have comforted me, but instead it made my chest tighten. Who was the woman Ethan had seen in her face, and why did the memory of her shake him so violently? Hours passed before he returned. I had imagined him calmer, ready to explain, ready to apologize, ready to be the man who held my hand during the ultrasound appointments and whispered that he trusted me even when I didn't trust myself. But the man who walked in wasn't that version of Ethan. His jaw was tight, his eyes swollen, and his hands trembled as he stood near the doorway, unable to come closer. I told him he needed to tell me what was going on, that I wouldn't let him hide behind silence while I held a child whose future he begged me to create. His mouth opened, then closed, as if the truth was too heavy to lift into words. Finally, he whispered that the baby looked exactly like someone from his past, a woman he had loved and lost in a way that had marked him so deeply he never spoke her name. A woman's death that, according to him, had shattered something in his spotless political dynasty. He said our daughter had her eyes, her cheeks, even the tiny swirl in her left ear. I felt a chill crawl up my spine as he said it wasn't possible, that he had taken a DNA test years ago to confirm something he refused to explain now. I wanted to demand answers, but before I could speak, he walked toward the crib for the first time. His hand hovered above the baby, trembling, as if he feared touching her would confirm a truth he wasn't ready to face. And just as his finger brushed her blanket, the door burst open. A tall, severe woman in a dark coat stepped inside, her eyes sharp and searching, eyes that carried the same shape as Ethan's. She looked at the baby, then at him, and her lips tightened with recognition and something colder. She whispered, "So it's true. She looks exactly like her." Then she turned her gaze to me, and her voice dropped to a tone that made my stomach twist. "You have no idea what you've done." The woman's words sliced through the room with the precision of a scalpel, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. She stood there, tall, composed, dressed in a coat that looked more like armor than clothing, her presence heavy enough to dim the air itself. Ethan stiffened beside the crib, shoulders locking in a posture that told me everything I needed to know. Whoever she was, she held power over him. Real power. The kind that didn't require raised voices or threats. The kind that came from lineage, wealth, and secrets buried so deep they warped every generation that followed. I clutched my daughter closer to my chest, and the woman's gaze flicked to us with a cold, assessing precision that made me feel like prey under a hunter's eye. She didn't look at my baby the way strangers do, curious, warm, polite. She looked at her as if she were a piece of evidence in a case she had already solved. Ethan tried to speak, but the woman raised a hand, silencing him without even looking in his direction. "Don't," she whispered sharply. "You knew this could happen." The tremor in her voice wasn't anger, it was fear. The type of fear rich families never show unless they believe the world they built is about to collapse. My heartbeat thudded against my ribs as I asked who she was. Ethan finally found his voice and whispered, "This is my mother." And suddenly, everything in me tensed. The matriarch, the one who had shaped him, the one whose approval he had probably been conditioned to seek since birth. Her presence made sense now, the elegance, the authority, the way she filled the room without raising her tone. but it didn't explain the dread pouring from her eyes as she stared at my child. I demanded to know why she said I had no idea what I'd done, but she turned her attention back to Ethan as if I were incidental, background noise in a nightmare resurfacing. "You promised you'd let it go," she murmured. "You promised you would bury it with her." Ethan's face twisted, torn between guilt and anguish. "I didn't do anything," he whispered. "I didn't plan this. I didn't choose." She cut him off again. "You don't have to choose when blood chooses for you." Her words sent a tremor down my spine. My daughter, only hours old, suddenly felt heavier in my arms, as if the weight of their history had been placed directly onto her tiny chest. I asked again, this time louder, firmer, what they were talking about. I deserved to know. I had carried this baby for months, endured the judgmental stares, the growing distance from Ethan, the quiet fear that I didn't belong in his world. But his mother only looked at me with a mix of pity and steel. "He didn't tell you," she said. "Of course he didn't." I felt anger bubbling inside me, hot and raw. "Tell me what?" I snapped. Ethan finally stepped toward me, his voice barely a breath. "Her name was Leela," he said. "She was—" His voice broke before he forced himself to continue. "She was my fiancée." My stomach dropped. I hadn't known, not really. I thought she might have been a past love, a ghost of something unfinished. But fiancé was a different kind of wound. His mother added quietly, "She died 5 years ago, and when she didn't leave quietly." Something in that phrasing chilled me. People die. They don't leave quietly unless what they leave behind is dangerous. My daughter whimpered softly, sensing the tension, and I rocked her instinctively. The motion drew Ethan's mother's eyes again. She stepped closer, too close, and I felt every muscle in my body tighten. She studied my daughter's face, her features, the fine details only a mother or someone obsessed would notice. And then she whispered, just loud enough for both of us to hear, "You gave birth to a child who looks exactly like the woman who nearly destroyed this family." My breath caught. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut as if the truth was a physical blow. But before I could respond, footsteps echoed in the hall, rapid, purposeful. A man in a suit appeared in the doorway, another stranger, but with the same sharp eyes, the same tension in his stance. He looked at Ethan, then at the baby, and his expression hardened. "They know," he said. "The moment the birth certificate was filed, they're already asking questions." Ethan's mother paled. The man added, "They're on their way." Ethan turned to me slowly, fear rippling across his face. "You and the baby, we have to leave, now." I didn't understand what was happening, not fully, not even halfway, but the panic in Ethan's voice was real enough to make my entire body tense. The hospital room, still warm with the softness of childbirth hours earlier, suddenly felt too bright, too open, too vulnerable. I glanced at the doorway where the suited man stood, his jaw tight, his hand hovering near his pocket, as if he were prepared for something I couldn't yet name. Ethan's mother pressed her lips together, her face drained of color. Whatever family secrets they'd been dancing around were no longer secrets. They were consequences, rushing towards us like a storm we couldn't outrun. My heartbeat thudded against my ribs as I asked who she was. Ethan finally found his voice and whispered, "I should have told you earlier." His eyes flooded with guilt. "My family, they're not just wealthy, they're powerful and dangerous when threatened." His mother flinched at the word dangerous, but she didn't deny it. That silence told me everything. Power like theirs wasn't the kind displayed in magazines or political campaigns. It was the kind that destroyed reputations, manipulated laws, erased truths and people when necessary. The suited man stepped inside fully now, closing the door behind him as if sealing us off from the outside world. "We need to leave within the next 2 minutes," he said. "They'll start with questions, then demands. After that—" He didn't finish the sentence, but the unfinished threat hung in the air like a noose. My breath hitched. My daughter stirred in my arms, her tiny fingers curling against my chest, oblivious to the chaos she had been born into. Ethan moved to help me out of the bed, his hands careful but urgent. "I'm sorry," he kept repeating under his breath. I never meant for you to be dragged into this. I thought, his voice cracked, I thought choosing someone outside the family meant keeping her safe. His mother's eyes flashed with something sharper than fear. Anger, maybe, or regret. You were naive, she whispered. You knew what Leela's death did to them. You knew they suspected— She stopped herself abruptly, darting a glance toward me. This is not the time. But it was exactly the time. Every half-hidden truth was another step into darkness, and I refused to walk blindly any longer. Suspected what? I demanded, my voice trembling but loud enough to slice through the room. Ethan closed his eyes, pain gathering like a storm across his expression. His mother shook her head, but the suited man, who was apparently done with evasions, answered instead. They never believed Leela's death was an accident. The words hit me like a slap. The room tilted. I stared at Ethan, searching for his denial, for anything, but he didn't offer it. His silence was worse than any admission. Before I could speak, the hallway outside exploded with footsteps. Several, fast, unrestrained. Voices rose. Someone said Ethan's full name with the kind of authority that didn't ask permission to enter a room. The suited man cursed under his breath. Ethan grabbed my elbow, his urgency turning into something close to terror. There's no time. We have to move. But his mother moved even faster. She stepped toward me, her voice low, trembling not from fear, but from something deeper, resolute. Listen to me carefully, she said. Whatever happens next, do not let them take that child. Do you understand? Her eyes burned into mine, suddenly fierce, almost protective. She looks like Leela. That alone is enough to make them desperate. The footsteps stopped outside our door. A shadow darkened the frosted window. Someone tried the handle. His mother whispered, "Run." The door burst open, and in the doorway stood a man whose presence sucked the air from the room. Tall, commanding, eyes sharp enough to cut through bone. He didn't look at Ethan first. He didn't look at his wife or the suited man. He looked straight at my baby. His jaw clenched, and his voice rolled through the room like thunder. "Give me the child." The man's command struck the room like lightning, sudden, blinding, irreversible. His voice carried a weight I felt in my bones, the kind of authority that had shaped Ethan's entire life and kept everyone else obedient through fear alone. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to threaten. The demand itself, spoken so calmly, was already a threat. My breath tangled in my throat as his gaze locked on my daughter. And in that instant, I understood with terrifying clarity. He didn't see her as a newborn. He saw her as a weapon, a mistake, or worse, confirmation of a truth he had spent years trying to bury. Ethan stepped between us instinctively, shoulders squared even as his hands shook. "Father, you can't." But the man cut him off with a single look, a silent rebuke so sharp, Ethan flinched as if struck. "I warned you," he murmured. "I told you what would happen if you kept chasing ghosts." His eyes flicked back to the baby, and something twisted in his expression. Recognition, disbelief, anger, fear, all tangled together in a way that made my stomach churn. "And now you expect me to accept this?" His wife, Ethan's mother, moved closer to me, not touching but shielding with her presence, a silent declaration that surprised even Ethan. "Leave the girl alone," she said softly, though her voice quivered. "None of this was her doing." He scoffed. "You think I'm concerned about her doing something?" His gaze burned into me now, stripping away every layer of certainty I had left. The problem isn't what she's done. The problem is what she proves. The suited man stepped forward, positioning himself in front of the door as if preparing for impact. "Sir, this isn't the place, not with hospital staff close by." But Ethan's father didn't care. His fury was too controlled, too calculated to explode outward. It condensed instead, creating a quiet pressure that suffocated the entire room. I forced myself to speak. My voice wobbled, but I didn't let it break. "She's a baby, my baby. You don't get to walk in here and demand—" Everything involving my son is my business, he snapped, and everything involving the woman he once intended to marry is most certainly mine. My pulse stuttered. Lila again, a ghost in our daughter's face, a ghost in his father's rage. Ethan's jaw tightened. "This isn't Lila," he said, his voice low but shaking. "She's gone. I didn't do anything wrong." His father stared at him with a fury that ran deeper than anger. Betrayal, fear, maybe even grief. "Then explain why this child has her face." His gaze dropped to my daughter, studying her with a horror he tried to disguise as logic. "Explain why she looks like the woman whose death we spent years trying to contain. Explain why her existence puts this entire family at risk." My heart pounded. The words felt unreal, like I had stepped into someone else's nightmare. "What are you implying?" I whispered. He turned to me slowly. "That this is not a coincidence." Then he added, colder, "that my son is either a fool or hiding something from all of us." Ethan took a step forward, voice cracking as he said, "Dad, stop. I loved Lila, yes, but I never—" His father's glare sliced him open. "You think I don't remember the rumors, the accusations?" He leaned in, his face inches from Ethan. "You think I don't know what they said about you the night she died?" Ethan froze. His mother gasped, and I felt the bottom of my stomach fall away. What did they say?" I whispered, unable to stop myself. But Ethan didn't answer, couldn't answer. His face was a portrait of torment, eyes wide, lips parted, breath shallow. His father's words had ripped open something in him so raw it pulsed in the air like a wound. Before anyone spoke again, the baby made a soft sound, a tiny whimper, a fragile breath. His father's expression shifted sharply, almost flinching at the sound. For a brief second, I saw something unexpected flicker across his face. Fear, yes, but also recognition deeper than shock. He knew something. He knew something about this child, about Lila, about Ethan, about the night she died. And then, as if confirming my suspicion, he whispered, "Take the child from her, now." Ethan lunged forward, shoving his father back. His mother grabbed my arm. The suited man reached inside his jacket, and in the chaos, the baby, my daughter, opened her eyes. Deep, dark eyes that did not match mine. Eyes that were identical to the woman Ethan once loved. Eyes his father clearly knew far too well. His father stumbled backward, face draining of color. "Oh, God," he whispered, "it's starting again." Before I could ask what he meant, alarms began blaring in the hallway, hospital security rushing toward our room, drawn by the commotion or perhaps by someone who had already placed a call. Ethan turned to me, voice breaking. "We have to run. They won't stop this time." I didn't remember standing up. I didn't remember my feet touching the cold hospital floor. All I knew was the pounding of my heart, the heat of my daughter's small body pressed to my chest, and Ethan's hand gripping mine with a desperation that bordered on frantic. The hallway outside flooded with red emergency lights, alarms echoing like a countdown neither of us understood. His mother whispered prayers under her breath. The suited man barked orders into his hidden earpiece. And Ethan's father, once immovable, unshakable, stood frozen, staring at the baby as if staring into the past he never outran. Ethan pulled me toward the back exit, his fingers trembling against my wrist. "We can make it before security gets here," he murmured, breathless, terrified. "They think they're coming for a disturbance, not a disappearance. Once we're out—" But his father's voice cracked through the panic like a whip. "You're making a mistake, Ethan." We stopped. Just a heartbeat, just long enough for the world to tilt again. He stepped forward, his composure shattered, his pride gone, his authority replaced by something I never expected to see in a man like him. Pleading. "You don't understand what this child represents, what she could expose." His eyes darted to mine, softer now, almost apologetic. "If the truth about Lila comes out, none of us will survive the fallout." That name again, always circling, always haunting, always unnamed in the ways that mattered. I felt a heat rise inside me, sharp and furious. "Then tell me the truth, right now.
All of it, because I carried this baby. I brought her into this world, and I deserve to know what threat she could possibly hold. Silence cracked the air. Ethan looked at his father, his voice barely a breath. Dad, did I kill her? The question hit like a car crash. His mother gasped, covering her mouth, tears spilling instantly. The suited man froze mid-step. Even the alarm seemed distant under the weight of Ethan's trembling voice. His father's face hollowed. No, he whispered, but they believed you did. Ethan staggered. The words sliced open an old wound he'd been too afraid to touch. Why? His father hesitated. 1 second, 2, and in those seconds I saw the truth he'd buried for years. Because Lila didn't just die, he said quietly. She disappeared, and before she did, she told people she was pregnant. My breath stopped. Ethan went pale. And when her body was found, his father continued, voice breaking, the autopsy showed she wasn't carrying a child after all. The rumor made our enemies circle like wolves. They accused you of silencing her. They accused our family of covering it up. He swallowed hard. We had to bury everything, the scandal, the theories, the possibility of anything else. But this baby, I whispered, trembling, she looks just like her. Too much like her, his mother added softly, enough to make people question what really happened that night. Ethan shook his head, eyes glassy. Dad, that's impossible. Even if she'd lived. His father cut him off, voice raw. There is something else you don't know. Something Lila told me the night before she vanished. He looked at the baby again, his fear deepening. She said there was someone threatening her, someone closer to the family than any of us imagined. The alarms grew louder, voices approaching. Ethan grabbed my hand again. We have to leave. We can figure out everything later. But his father raised a trembling hand. Take her, protect her, but understand this. Whoever wanted Lila gone may still be watching, and if this baby truly resembles her, then they may think the past is resurfacing. My knees weakened, not from fear, though fear wrapped itself around me like ice, but from the crushing realization that my daughter's face carried a history soaked in danger. The suited man suddenly opened the stairwell door. Now, move. Ethan's mother kissed my forehead, a gesture so unexpected it shook me, and whispered, Be strong for her. You may be the only one who can. Ethan pulled me down the stairs. We descended in frantic silence, the newborn cooing softly against my heartbeat. At the exit, cold night air rushed into my lungs like freedom and warning all at once. A black SUV waited with the engine running. Ethan opened the door, helping me inside, his hands trembling uncontrollably. But just as Ethan climbed inside after me, just as the suited man slammed his door shut, just as the vehicle lurched forward, a shadow stepped into the street. A figure in dark clothing. A face half lit by the street lamps. Someone Ethan recognized instantly. His breath left him in a violent exhale. No, he whispered. It can't be. The figure lifted her face fully into the light, and I saw